The fluorescent lights of your local grocery store are practically glowing with a false sense of security right now. You walk down the aisles, your grocery store looks fine right now. The shelves are full and the prices feel normal. But that calm you are feeling is a carefully constructed trap. That is about to change, and most people will not see it until it already has. Beneath the surface of those perfectly organized displays, 7 foods are being quietly hit by the same set of forces all at once. We are talking about a convergence of droughts, tariffs, a border closure, and a global shipping disruption. Each one is serious on its own, but they are all landing on the same grocery bill in the same window right now. The reason you have not felt the full impact yet comes down to a deliberate delay built into the food supply chain. The prices you are paying today are not reflecting the current reality of global agriculture or shipping. Instead, those price tags are an echo from the past based on wholesale agreements that manufacturers and distributors signed months ago. Those old contracts are what is keeping the illusion alive on the shelf. But those agreements are rapidly expiring. When the new contracts take effect, the prices will not just drift upward gradually. They are going to reset dramatically and permanently. Smart shoppers have been paying close attention to the agricultural data, the trade reports, and the shipping indices. They have spotted this massive gap between what the commodities market is currently experiencing and what the retail shelves are showing you today. They are not panicking, but they are absolutely acting. Smart shoppers are already moving on 7 specific foods before everyone else catches on. They understand that buying these specific items right now is no longer just about filling a pantry. It is a highly calculated financial investment to protect their family. It is about locking in yesterday's prices before the rest of the country wakes up to the shifting reality of our global supply network. The window to protect your household budget is wide open right now, but the timeline is moving fast and the opportunity to stock up affordably is going to disappear before you realize what hit you. While you're bracing for the massive price resets we just talked about, there is another much quieter theft happening right inside your shopping cart today. The absolute dollar amount you see on the store receipt is really only the tip of the iceberg. The far more dangerous threat to your family's budget is a silent erosion of value orchestrated through 2 ruthless corporate strategies known as shrinkflation and skimpflation. These are highly calculated techniques designed specifically to trick your eyes and your taste buds. Let us start with shrinkflation, which is essentially a stealth price increase hiding in plain sight. Instead of risking a massive public backlash by raising the sticker price of a popular item, food conglomerates rely on a psychological threshold known as the just noticeable difference. They shave off a fraction of an ounce here, a few grams there, shrinking the physical size or the total count of the product while keeping the retail price completely frozen. They are betting that as a busy shopper rushing through the aisles after a long day of work, you will simply grab that familiar bright packaging and toss it into your cart without reading the fine print on the net weight. Historically, everyday staples like paper towels, toilet paper, and coffee have been the prime targets for this tactic. The mathematics behind this deception are staggering when you actually break them down. For instance, the per-unit price of certain shrinkflated coffee brands has skyrocketed by an unbelievable 32% simply because the roasters sneakily removed a few ounces of grounds from the bag. You are still paying the same amount at the register, but your morning coffee routine is quietly getting much more expensive, forcing you to stretch your supply or return to the store sooner and spend more money over the course of the month. But as we move deeper into the current economic climate, consumers and lawmakers are finally catching on. Regulatory bodies worldwide are beginning to fight back against this deceptive packaging. Countries like Austria and Brazil have recently implemented strict laws requiring manufacturers to clearly label packages when the volume decreases, and the United States Congress is heavily scrutinizing similar measures to protect buyers. Because of this incoming legal pressure, corporate food giants are now pivoting to skimpflation, which is a far more insidious and deeply frustrating tactic. If shrinkflation targets the physical volume of your food, skimpflation directly attacks the quality and the nutritional integrity of what you are feeding your children. It is incredibly difficult for the average consumer to prove. You do not have a chemistry lab in your kitchen to verify that a chocolate bar suddenly contains significantly less premium cocoa butter, that a jar of peanut butter has been quietly diluted with cheaper oils. or that your favorite brand of chips has been completely reformulated. These corporations are stripping out expensive, high-quality ingredients and replacing them with cheap, synthetic alternatives to protect their profit margins. For example, consumers have noticed that major snack brands like Pringles have actually shrunk the physical diameter and weight of their crisps from 165 grams down to 134 grams, while also shifting their manufacturing processes, resulting in a noticeably blander taste. In Europe, a major court ruling recently caught a massive conglomerate keeping the exact same packaging dimensions for a chocolate bar while quietly reducing the actual weight inside from 100 grams to 90 grams. This relentless slow-motion destruction of value is actively destroying consumer trust. Major market reports indicate that shoppers are increasingly abandoning the famous national brands they grew up with, switching instead to private store labels just to survive the crushing cost of living. This is exactly why the most prepared, financially savvy households are changing their entire approach to grocery shopping. They understand that buying highly processed, heavily packaged foods is a losing game. The smartest defense against corporate skimpflation is to build your household reserves around single-ingredient, unprocessed whole foods. When you buy a bag of raw rice, dried beans, or whole coffee beans, you are completely bypassing the corporate boardroom's ability to water down your nutrition. You take back total control over the quality, the volume, and the value of your family's food supply, ensuring that every single dollar you spend translates into genuine sustenance rather than corporate profit. To understand how deeply compromised your grocery bill is about to become, you have to look at the massive climate and trade traps actively closing around specific, highly vulnerable pantry staples, starting with olive oil. Most people already flinched at this one once when prices spiked by an unbelievable 78% between 2022 and 2024, driven by severe back-to-back droughts across the Mediterranean growing regions. When Spain reported a partial harvest recovery in 2025 and prices dropped slightly on the shelf, shoppers breathed a collective sigh of relief and stopped thinking about it. That sense of relief is a massive mistake. The International Olive Council projects global output at roughly 344 million tons for the current season, which might sound substantial, but it remains well below the long-term historical average. The truth is that the aquifers in southern Europe are completely depleted, and the underlying supply problem was never actually fixed. It was merely interrupted. Furthermore, acute scarcity in Greece has heavily constrained exports, leading to rampant market distortion and fraud. Italian authorities recently launched Operation Mamma Mia to seize massive consignments of Spanish and Greek oil that were fraudulently documented as premium Italian product. The bottle that looks affordable today might not even be genuine, and the actual supply of real olive oil is incredibly tight. Agricultural data platforms tracking hundreds of millions of trade points indicate that the current quarter is the absolute last favorable window before true supply uncertainty fully materializes. By the time autumn arrives and the old crop inventory runs out before the new crop is available, the price squeeze will be sharper than ever. The second item you need to secure immediately is coffee, and the relief you might be seeing at the register right now is entirely temporary. After severe droughts in Brazil and weak harvests in Vietnam pushed coffee prices to absolute record levels through 2025, a projected record-size harvest for Brazil in 2026 briefly softened wholesale prices. But two massive forces are building right now that the current shelf price has not yet caught up to. First, the ongoing shipping disruption in the Strait of Hormuz has drastically raised fuel costs, insurance premiums, and freight rates for every single commodity transported by sea, including your morning coffee. Roasters absorb these massive logistics costs initially, but they are going to pass them directly onto you during their fall and winter contract renegotiations. Second, and far more terrifying, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has confirmed a 67% probability of a super El Niño developing through the year 2026. This is a direct catastrophic threat to the critical flowering rains in Brazil's primary growing regions during September and October. If those specific seasonal rains fail or are disrupted by El Niño, the temporary price relief disappears instantly and permanently. The United States Department of Agriculture already shows non-alcoholic beverage prices outpacing their 20-year historical average. Smart shoppers are buying extra bags of whole coffee beans right now while the window remains open, knowing that when coffee gets highly expensive, most families are forced to quietly downgrade the quality of their morning routine. The third item hiding in plain sight is granulated sugar and household sweeteners. A standard 5-pound bag of sugar typically sits in the back of a cabinet for months, meaning price increases usually arrive as a single surprise at the register rather than a recognizable trend. The Department of Agriculture reported that sugar and sweets prices were over 7% higher in May 2026 compared to the previous year, and they are forecasting a full-year increase of nearly 7%. The forces behind this are compounding rapidly under the surface of the market. Brazil, the world's dominant exporter, constantly shifts its sugarcane harvest between sugar production and ethanol fuel depending on global energy markets, creating a structural trade-off that average shoppers never see. Meanwhile, Ghana and the Ivory Coast, which together supply roughly 60% of the world's cocoa, experienced catastrophic decade-worst harvest failures in 2023 and 2024 due to drought and severe crop disease. Because cocoa prices remain astronomically high and new trees take years to mature, candy and chocolate manufacturers are compensating by heavily altering their commercial recipes to use far more sugar and artificial sweeteners. This massive industrial shift in ingredients drives up the global demand for sugar exactly when production is being revised downward. Right now, basic sugar and sweeteners are still priced low enough that most people ignore them, but that is precisely when prices move the fastest. Grabbing extra bags of sugar, a large jar of raw honey, or pure maple syrup today is a brilliant, low-cost investment that guarantees your family is insulated from this impending surge. The real shock to your family's dinner table goes far beyond your morning coffee or baking supplies, hitting exactly where it hurts the most, right at the center of the plate. You have probably already noticed the painful squeeze on fresh protein stretching a pound of ground beef further than you used to, or swapping it out for cheaper alternatives like turkey. But if you think those high prices at the meat counter are the absolute ceiling, you are falling for one of the most dangerous misconceptions in the supermarket today. What we are witnessing is not a temporary spike or a seasonal fluctuation, but rather a complete structural decimation of the domestic cattle supply. According to the Department of Agriculture, the United States cattle herd recently dropped to roughly 86 million head, which is the absolute smallest number recorded since 1951. This 75-year low is the direct result of persistent, devastating droughts across the Great Plains that forced ranchers to liquidate their breeding stock simply because they could no longer afford to feed them on dry land. Rebuilding a cattle herd takes years of biological time, and agricultural experts state that a meaningful recovery is highly unlikely before the end of the decade. To make matters worse, a severe biosecurity threat involving a parasitic fly recently forced the United States to completely suspend all live cattle imports from Mexico, instantly erasing over 1 million feeder cattle from our supply chain, with no clear end in sight. While fresh ground beef prices soar, smart shoppers are quietly pivoting to the canned meat section. Canned chili beef stew and premium canned beef are currently sitting on the shelves at prices that reflect old supply conditions, making them a brilliant high-value target for your pantry right now. But when you walk down that canned goods aisle, you are stepping into a massive financial trap that almost no one sees coming. There is a widespread comforting belief that the canned goods section is the ultimate recession shelf, a safe haven completely immune to the vicious inflation hitting the rest of the store. That belief might be true about the beans or the soup inside the can, but it is completely wrong about the metal wrapping around it. The underlying crisis here is not agricultural, it is industrial and political. Recent catastrophic shifts in trade policy have doubled the tariffs on imported steel and aluminum to a staggering 50%. Industry insiders are experiencing unprecedented spikes in raw material costs, and those massive expenses are currently traveling straight up the supply chain. The only reason you have not seen a massive price hike on every single can of tomatoes, vegetables, and soup in your store is because of commercial contract timing. Retailers lock in their pricing through annual contracts typically negotiated between October and December. What you see on the shelf today was priced under last year's contracts, long before these massive new metal premiums took full effect. When those contracts roll over this fall, the entire canned goods category is going to reprice simultaneously, completely resetting the baseline cost of emergency food storage. This metal crisis creates a devastating double impact when you look at canned seafood, which is the absolute cornerstone of any serious practical pantry. Items like canned tuna sardines and wild-caught salmon are currently absorbing two massive, simultaneous pressures. First, you have the exorbitant new cost of the aluminum can itself. Second, you have the severe global shipping disruptions in key maritime choke points that are drastically increasing the freight, fuel, and insurance costs to transport these fish from overseas processors to American ports. Wholesale prices for shelf-stable seafood have already surged by over 11%, but the retail shelves are still stubbornly displaying yesterday's prices. Every flat of tuna or sardines you buy today is essentially locking in a massive discount against the inevitable reality of the wholesale market. You are leveraging a unique window of information asymmetry, buying high-density, shelf-stable protein at a cost that will soon look like an absolute bargain. Before those retail contracts expire and the new reality is printed on the price tags, securing these vital proteins should be your absolute highest priority. Securing the right items before the massive contract repricing hits the retail shelves is a brilliant defensive maneuver. But buying hundreds of dollars worth of raw wheat rice or pasta is completely useless if you just throw those bags into a standard kitchen cabinet. Without proper atmospheric control, up to 30% of stored grains can turn into complete biological waste, ruined by spoilage, rancidity, or insect infestations within a single year. The urban preparedness community knows that the global gold standard for long-term food preservation, meaning 25 to 30 years of viable shelf life, relies on a highly specific concept called molecular lockdown. This advanced preservation is achieved through the flawless combination of metallized PET film, commonly known as mylar bags, and oxygen absorbers. Oxygen absorbers are not some kind of modern magic. They are actually a simple but incredibly powerful thermodynamic reaction. Each packet is filled with microparticulate iron powder, and when that iron is exposed to the air, it undergoes controlled oxidation, essentially rusting at a highly accelerated rate. This rapid chemical reaction aggressively consumes the oxygen trapped inside your sealed mylar bag, dragging the ambient oxygen concentration from the normal atmospheric level of 20.9% all the way down to an extreme 0.01%. Scientific research proves that dropping oxygen levels below 1% completely halts the growth of aerobic bacteria, prevents toxin-producing mold, and instantly terminates the life cycle of any microscopic pests that might have hitchhiked from the factory, suffocating their eggs in roughly 12 days. But there are strict rules to this science, and you have absolutely zero margin for error when handling oxygen absorbers. Once you open their factory packaging, they begin reacting with the room air immediately, meaning you have 10 to 15 minutes maximum to place them into your food bags and heat seal the top. You can never recharge or reuse them. You must also physically inspect them, because if a packet feels soft and powdery, it is alive and ready to work. But if it feels hard and brittle like a rock, the iron is already completely oxidized, and putting a dead packet into your food will ruin the entire batch. You also have to match the cubic centimeter capacity to your bag size, typically using 300 to 500 cc for a 1-gallon bag, and 2,000 to 2,500 cc for a heavy-duty 5-gallon bucket liner. You cannot just use standard plastic vacuum sealer bags, because normal plastic is too porous and allows oxygen to slowly seep back in. Mylar boasts an incredibly low oxygen transmission rate, blocking out air thousands of times more effectively than standard plastics. For true 25-year protection, independent food security agencies recommend a mylar thickness of 7 mil to prevent microscopic pinholes from forming at the creases of the bag. Furthermore, the metallic layer of thick mylar blocks 100% of destructive ultraviolet and visible light, preventing the molecular breakdown of vital nutrients like vitamin A. Just as important as the packaging is understanding the strict chemical matrix of what you absolutely cannot store this way. The fundamental rule for long-term storage spanning up to 25 years is that the food must have less than 10% moisture and less than 10% fat. White rice, rolled oats, dried beans, pasta, and raw wheat are absolute gold in this environment because their dry starch structures survive indefinitely when you stop the oxidation process. But brown rice, nuts, and dried meats contain heavy natural oils that will inevitably break down and go rancid within 6 to 12 months. Regardless of how perfectly you remove the oxygen, you must also never under any circumstances place an oxygen absorber into a bucket of granulated sugar or salt. The chemical reaction removes trace moisture, immediately turning your sugar into an unbreakable, fossilized brick. Sugar and salt will last indefinitely in their natural state as long as you simply keep them away from moisture. Most importantly, storing food with greater than 35% moisture in an oxygen-free environment is extremely dangerous, as it creates the perfect anaerobic conditions for deadly botulism spores to multiply. Finally, mastering this system requires brutal inventory discipline and temperature control. You need to clearly label every single bag with a bold black marker, listing the precise product name, the net weight, the date you packed it, and the projected expiration. You must always operate on a strict first-in, first-out rotation so nothing gets forgotten in the dark. The ideal storage temperature is below 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is roughly 21 degrees Celsius. The law of thermodynamics in food preservation dictates that for every 10-degree Fahrenheit drop, or 5.6 degrees Celsius, the shelf life of your food essentially doubles. Keeping your heavily protected Mylar bags inside sturdy plastic buckets in a cool, dark basement is the ultimate defensive posture to ensure your financial investments safely outlast any future supply chain disruption. You have to completely change the way you view the physical act of buying your family's groceries right now. What we are talking about is no longer just basic pantry preparedness or emergency survival. It is a highly calculated financial maneuver known in the economic world as arbitrage. When you look at the severe macro-level pressures we just discussed, from unprecedented steel tariffs to massive agricultural failures, you realize that your grocery cart is actually one of the most powerful financial defense tools you possess. Most average consumers operate in a purely reactive state when it comes to their household budget. They wait until the prices officially go up on the shelf and then they complain. They spend more money, or they are forced to simply buy less food. When a shelf suddenly goes bare, they scramble in a panic for whatever is left over. They constantly feel like the economic system is working against them, because it absolutely is, and they are always responding to it a few weeks too late from a position of zero leverage. But smart shoppers operate from a positional standpoint. They understand that a severe drought in Kansas, a massive tariff decision in Washington, a biosecurity border closure, and a shipping lane conflict in the Persian Gulf are all going to show up on the exact same grocery receipt in the exact same week. By understanding this mechanism before the actual price moves, you can act long before the rest of the crowd does. You are essentially locking in last month's prices, securing goods that the retail shelf will soon no longer offer at that affordable rate. This strategy works because of a deeply ingrained flaw in the retail system known as asymmetric lag. When wholesale commodities and supply chain costs spike, manufacturers and retailers pass those massive increases up the chain to the consumer incredibly quickly to protect their profit margins. But when wholesale prices occasionally cool down, they move agonizingly slow to lower the retail price back down, meaning you, the consumer, are always the one forced to absorb the lag. This is not an accident, it is a deliberate feature of food pricing. However, you can actively exploit this systemic lag to your advantage by front-loading your purchases during the gap between the wholesale commodity shock and the final retail contract reset. The absolute best example of this is the flour, pasta, and cereal aisle. The Department of Agriculture recently projected the total United States winter wheat production at its lowest level since the 1960s. And the specific high-protein wheat used for bread and pasta is facing its worst output since 1957 due to historic droughts. Farm-level wheat prices have already surged massively, but the bags of flour and boxes of pasta sitting on your local shelf right now were priced under last year's contracts. That catastrophic crop failure is currently moving slowly through the milling and baking supply chain. And when the retail contracts turn over, the repricing will hit multiple stores simultaneously. By purchasing extra pounds of flour, pasta, and dried cereals today, you are essentially investing your dollars at a guaranteed high rate of return before the worst wheat harvest in decades reaches the checkout screen. None of this requires you to dramatically change how you live or force you into massive credit card debt. It simply means strategically buying slightly more of what your household already consumes before the prices catch up to what the raw agricultural data already guarantees. Think of it as a completely risk-free investment portfolio. If you spend an extra $50 or $100 today on shelf-stable goods like canned tuna, coffee, and pasta that are mathematically guaranteed to increase in price soon, you have just outperformed almost every traditional savings account available right now. If the crisis miraculously averts, you have simply purchased food your family was going to eat anyway at a highly affordable price. The true preparation window always exists just before the visible signal flashes red to the general public. By the time the shelf price officially confirms what the supply chain data has been screaming for months, the window of opportunity is completely gone. You are not hoarding in fear, you are practicing intelligent cost averaging, hedging against undeniable retail inflation, and quietly building a fortress of financial security for your family right inside your own home. The quiet calm you see on your local supermarket shelves right now is the ultimate illusion, masking a complete repricing event that is already locked into the global food system. But recognizing these hidden pressure points before the rest of the world wakes up gives you an incredible, life-changing advantage. You do not need to panic. You do not need to max out your credit cards. And you certainly do not need to transform your entire life overnight. All that is required is a simple, deliberate shift in how you execute your routine grocery runs over the next few weeks. Start this very week by focusing on olive oil and shelf-stable canned seafood. Olive oil spot prices are still sitting at a temporary discount before the fall crop uncertainties take hold. And canned tuna and sardines are holding on to old contract pricing despite massive wholesale increases. On your next 2 or 3 routine shopping trips, turn your attention to the canned goods section, securing extra beans, crushed tomatoes, soups, and vegetables before the autumn metal contract renegotiations reprice those shelves across every major retailer simultaneously. During those same trips, grab a few extra bags of flour and boxes of pasta while last year's wheat prices are still protecting your checkout total. Finally, over the following month, round out your home reserves with whole bean coffee, granulated sugar, and canned beef products before the broader agricultural forecasts catch up with retail reality. By taking these small, practical steps today, you are effectively taking control of your household budget and removing the anxiety of unpredictable grocery bills. You are turning potential vulnerability into lasting peace of mind and self-reliance for your family. If this practical breakdown helped you see your local grocery store through a clearer lens, please share this video with someone you care about. Leave a comment down below with the items you are prioritizing, and subscribe to Practical Prep Guide to stay ahead of the curve. Thank you for watching. Stay safe and take care of each other.